So a few people have said, Simon, you should go back to doing Q&A, so I thought we would do a Q&A. I appreciate it. And we go to our first question, which is from Just Tired 9957. I feel your pain, my friend, who says, I know the numbers weren't there for NXT ups and downs. Please subscribe to me and subscribe to What Culture Wrestling. That's what we're talking about. But do you think you could cover the bigger events here? Roadblock was definitely worth talking about. Yes, so that is the idea. We have done a few NXT shows. Just very sadly, this week was crazy for me, and I didn't have any time. That's the honest truth of it. But yes, that is the stuff that I can cover. I will always cover here when I can. I try and watch everything, even if I'm not reporting on it or reviewing it, whatever word we do want to use. So I did have plans to do Roadblock, but for reasons I'm not going to get into, something came up and I wasn't able to. But I appreciate the question, and the answer is yes. JD610 says, what was the biggest struggle you had during your initial training to be a wrestler? It's a very interesting question. I did mention you could ask me questions about my wrestling career, which I'm always happy to talk about. Some people still go, you're a wrestler, Simon. I've almost been a wrestler for 8 years, which is quite funny. So I think initially it's just the training. Like, the training is one of the best things I've ever done, but it's also one of the hardest things I've ever done. I'm sure I've talked about this before. The day after my first session, I wasn't able to go into work. It's when I still had an office job because my body was just so beaten up. And you do have to push through some sessions to get to I don't want to call it the fun part because training is fun, but obviously performing in front of a live crowd, you get the energy, you get the adrenaline rush, and it becomes very addictive very, very quickly. So it was just, getting your head screwed on straight. And this was the third time I trained to be a wrestler. The first 2 times I've been broken by it, either mentally or physically, not in a bad way, just, oh man, I can't carry this on. And maybe I needed those experiences to get to number 3. Again, the best things come in threes, they say. So that was probably the biggest struggle. And the piece of advice I tell everyone is that everyone says, oh, I'm going to train for 6 months, not in wrestling, but to get in shape. I'm going to do a bunch of cardio. I'm going to go to the gym. It's a waste of your time, right? Nothing will prepare you for wrestling training or wrestling like going to wrestling training. So just bite the bullet, whip off the hat, run around naked, whatever the hell the phrase would be, and go. And I said this on my social media the other day as well, cheap plug, simonmiller316, that it's something everybody should try if you have the inkling. You don't have to, of course. But there's no way to fail, right? The failing is you really want to go and you don't go, even then it's not a failure. But some people think, if I don't go and I don't become a wrestler or I don't main event WrestleMania. No. Go there, try it. If it's not for you, there's a bunch of other things you can do in wrestling. And even if you go back to being a fan, well, that's awesome as well, because and you can sit on the couch and you can enjoy it even more. Bash426 says, Simon, how do you want John Cena to retire at the end of the year? Should he be the heel or should he be a face? And should he lose the championship if he does have the title? Now, that is a fascinating thing to get into, because originally I'd fantasy booked this till the cows come home because I'm a massive nerd, and that was John Cena loses to Cody Rhodes at WrestleMania 41, and then through hustle, loyalty, and respect and never giving up, he goes to a special event in December called, probably John Cena's Final Dance or something dumb like that, and he finally wins number 17 and he goes out with a championship, much like Sting did. Now, that's not going to happen if he's a bad guy, and I actually think that could have tied into his decision to turn heel, because now I think he will win at WrestleMania 41, he will be the champion, and given that he does still have loads of date book, I think he's still got like 30 dates left, so again, we've only got April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December, but we've got 9 months. So, it's a lot. He could turn up for most shows, so he can be the champion, and he would be more active than some other people we've seen recently. So I think he'll go all the way to December, and I think he'll go out by losing the championship. I think he'll hold it that long to somebody. Now, I like the idea of Cody Rhodes having to fight his way back, much like Cody did to get back to Roman. He went through Brock Lesnar and whoever else he fought in that year. Was that 2023? I get confused. That worked, and again, originally maybe he should have been the champion there, but he wasn't, and he got a big pop. He gets his moment at WrestleMania 40. So, yes, I mean, it could be a Randy Orton. You could do it that way if you wanted to tap into the nostalgia, but I think he will have a match with Randy Orton, and I think he'll have a match with CM Punk in the interim, but I think he'll beat those people, because I think those people are beatable, not in a bad way, just because John Cena is John Cena, and he has a certain magic power, and then Cody will put something on the line, or he'll win some sort of event, which sets him up for that John Cena thing, and then John Cena will magically turn babyface at the end of the night. That always happens. And he will acknowledge Cody as the captain, to use Cody's own words. I think that's really smart, because Cody is going to be the number one babyface for a long time. And John Cena sort of, taking this amazing heel run that we've wanted to see and almost taking the power of that and putting it onto Cody Rhodes' shoulders is only going to extend it. Now, there's loads of other things you could do. He could lose it as a SummerSlam. They go, oh man, I shouldn't have been that guy. He could end up in a tag team match, right? Maybe his last match is Cody Rhodes and somebody else taking on The Rock and John Cena. Right? They would do crazy, crazy numbers. But I would imagine the last time we see John Cena now is him losing his championship, but we end with just happiness and loveliness and all those kind of things. Much like he did when so I think it'd be similar to when John Cena beat The Rock second time, once in a lifetime, absolute lie. And even though The Rock and John Cena had kind of been a bit babyface and kind of been a bit heel, I mean, it wasn't as egregious as this one. Egregious is not the right word. It wasn't as obvious as this one. It will end with that kind of patting on the back. And that's probably the idea The Rock had. I assume it was him that came up with this plan. I don't know. So I will go with that for now, but I'm recording this video before we've seen the under the roof for one time in Belgium, Brussels, and seeing how Cody and John Cena interact with each other there is going to be massive. I do think this way we've got now is way more interesting, and I'm very excited about it. And I was going to do a video called The Best Heel Turns of All Time. We already did that last year, but if I was going to redo it, John Cena would probably be 1 or 2. Get Bored Too says, hey Simon, I was recently at a show of yours in Exeter, that's UPW, because you wrote, you told me you were going to cut off James Storm's hair and eat it. I may be a heel at UPW, and I was wondering how it felt to get a pinfall over a name as big as James Storm. So it's awesome, and it's great, and it's wonderful, and you do have out-of-body moments. You're like, how the hell is this happening? Because obviously I used to watch James Storm on TNA all the time. But what's really cool, and the best part about it, is you get to interact with them in the locker room, you get to sit down there and plan a match, and you realize that they're just, especially in James Storm's case, just a nice dude, wants to do business, wants to be creative, wants to have fun, wants to make sure he gets his stuff in, but wants to make sure you can work your stuff in as well. And that's the true moment, I suppose, where you kind of look in the mirror and have a bit of a giggle, because you're like, how am I doing this? But yeah, they're the best moments, and it's very, very surreal. It's very, very bizarre. But especially on the drive home afterwards, you're like, yeah, I got to pin James Storm to become the UPW champion. And I won't spoil that, but it was filled with shenanigans and a little bit of goofy wrestling for life too. So yes, I have been fortunate enough to experience some of those things, and long may they continue. Because yeah, I used to watch Beer Money all the time when I was younger, and then I'm pinning him in a match. It makes no sense to me. You may say it's 2 + 2 = potato. Brian Flanagan says, some friends and I got to see you in the last match. I like how you've made this all about me. You'll inflate my ego. Why you guys were in Rochester, New York? That was around about a year ago. Rochester. What a fun show that is. That's nice to say. I do have news on that soon, but I can't talk about it at the moment. What was your favorite experience, memory, part of that tour? Keep it up, man. Love you. And I love you too, Brian. Let's go for a meal first. So I really did enjoy the touring aspect of it. If you don't know, I was in America for 2 months last year, just after WrestleMania 40. And I went all down the East Coast touring the last match. And we had good houses and we had bad houses and we had mega crowds and we had bad crowds and all that stuff. And it was very much living the life of a pro wrestler, even though it was half pro wrestling, half theatre. But theatre actors do this too. It's just not talked about as much. I get it, because we're into a certain industry. And yeah, getting to have that experience, I actually got into it quite a lot. It's really hard and it's really challenging, because you do a show, you drive to the next town, you go to the hotel, you wake up, you go to the gym, you find some food, you go to the town, you do the show, you blah, blah, blah. And really taxing on your body and your mind. But I think what I liked about it was, I can survive doing this, and I'm okay, and I actually enjoy it to a certain extent. It was still very nice to come home and relax for a little bit. So all of that, but I think it was the fact that I was a long way from home, and maybe even people like your good self, Brian, would come up to us during the meet and greet afterwards, and they said such kind things to me. And it's always nice when that happens. But because it was happening on a consecutive basis, maybe I was just able to take it in a little bit more. And it made me feel warm and fuzzy in my tum-tum, obviously, because all I really do is sit here and make videos. And the fact that that's managed to have somewhat of a positive impact on people, I don't think I'll ever be able to understand it, but I'll always be massively appreciative of it. And I also think I love the fact that I got to do character stuff. I think there's some questions in here, I can't remember, about being a babyface and a heel. But that was the main villain in the theatre piece about wrestling. But it wasn't me, right? The character's name summed up how silly and great the show was, called Alexander Swagger. In my wrestling career, it's very much me, or an extension of me. Whereas that was me getting to, again, just take on a completely different persona, which also ties into the acting work that I do. So I love that as well, especially because people were very nice about my performance. That will always make you feel good. But yeah, one of those things I remember for a long time, and I feel privileged that I got the part. Slayer OA8886 or something like that says, can nobody talks like that beyond every ups and downs? Also, can it be longer? It's hilarious. I do need to bring more of those stuff back. I think it's one of those things where sometimes people say, Simon, you do too many skits, and then you get lovely messages like that. So I want to find the balance, and also I never want to do it for the sake of doing it. I want to make sure I watch an episode of Raw, SmackDown, Dynamite and go, well, that doesn't make any sense. Oh, I can do that skit. In terms of them being longer, I think shorter is better, because I find, especially with audience retention, which is a really dull thing to talk about, if they're short and sweet, people want more, and they often go back to watch them again. And understandably, if they're a bit longer, people get bored. But it's really cool that people do remember that stuff, because I introduced that a long time ago. So the fact it resonated with you, Massive thumbs up. DesPO4 says, first off, thank you for all you do for wrestling. Always lovely to hear. Blows my brain. Again, you're someone who I've looked up to simply due to your positive outlook on wrestling. So much that I've created wrestling content myself. I mean, what do you even say to that, right? Totally lovely. You've also shown me it's okay to be yourself. Yes, I like that. And to stay true to that always, which for that I forever respect you. Let's just stop there. Let's just end the video. As for my question, what has the transition been like being a pro wrestler from a mental and physical standpoint? Well, I guess that's very similar to the earlier question, but now we can talk about it in relation to shows. Because I've said this, when you turn up to an event and you don't know anyone, you become a 10-year-old boy at school again. Nobody likes me, nobody's talking to me. And of course, in some wrestling circles, respect, shake people's hand is important, and I always try and do that. But you may miss someone, or you may not realize somebody's there. Then you worry, oh my gosh, did I accidentally be rude to them? I didn't mean to. And it all comes from a place of anxiety and apprehension and just being a bit nervous. Like so many times, 99.9% of the time, when I'm behind the curtain, man, I'm having a conniption. Like, this is really scary, but I think I've talked about this before as well. I find that feeling to be a privilege, because if you're into the whole enjoy the moment and don't worry about other things, you want to be locked in, pro wrestling will do that, because again, you've got a live crowd, you can feel the energy, you know you want to do a good job, you've got a load of spots to remember, maybe you have a promo, you've got your music coming out, and of course when you go through the curtain, that's when you have to be in the mode and ready to go. It's not when you get to the ring. And for me, and again, we've definitely talked about this, the hardest part mentally is just my body dysmorphia, which I laugh about. That's like a defense mechanism, but it's also, I'm totally fine with it. I mean, I'd rather it wasn't there, but I don't want to think people, I struggle with it, but not in a way where I deserve any sympathy or anything like that. But I do want to talk about it, because I know other people go through this too. But yeah, deciding what gear you're going to be in, and do I look fat, and do I look terrible, yada, yada, yada. And of course, when you're in skin-tight spandex, even if you're pretty lean, all of a sudden you look fat. It's crazy. You can be standing there in your boxes, or your, what do Americans call it? I can't remember now, but your pants, whatever. No, pants, your underwear, right? You can be standing there in your underwear, and you put your spandex on, and you put on 10 pounds. You're like, what? It's just because it's so close to your skin. So there is a lot that goes into it, which is another reason I always want to be positive when reviewing wrestling, because, and listen, everyone's allowed to do whatever the flub they want to do, but I think a lot of people that have similar jobs to me forget that we're talking about human beings here, and they don't, even when they're not focusing, even when they are focusing on the character, it's wrestling, right? There's a very, very specific blurred line. And I think you can be constructive critically without annihilating these people, because again, mentally it can be very hard. And I would say that of all the things I do in my life, not only do I get the most joy from wrestling, that's where a lot of the struggles come from too. And I would imagine that's the same for a lot of people when you do have a passion. So yes, it can be tough, but again, anything that's worthwhile is a little bit hard to begin with. Performance Check says, hey Simon, thanks for your work. My pleasure, trust me. How did you decide what gear you wanted to wrestle in? Well, that ties in. Did it take a while to find the right style? So I change up my gear all the time. It actually depends on how I'm feeling body-wise, which is dumb, but I also think it surprises people. And I actually have some Gears of War inspired biker shorts that I have. So kind of what Goldberg used to wear, if you don't know what a biker short is. And I want to wear them soon, but I don't believe I'm lean enough. So I want to get lean enough before I debut them. And then I have a couple of singlets, which are like old school 90s, 80s singlets, because I realized that everybody had a new age singlet, and I was like, well, I want to be different, so I went for them too. They're very stripped back, and I want to get some more done with some extra colors on them, whatever it would be, extra designs. But I mean, I always knew I wanted to wear biker shorts. I've never really worn trunks. I just don't feel like I would be comfortable in trunks, but I've also never tried them, so I'm assuming here, which is what we should. And the singlet that I first wore, which was like a baby grow, is because I wanted to cover up as much of my body as possible for the reasons you're already thinking about. But again, that's an evolution, and we do learn. And now the singlets I wear, they expose a lot, but they also just give me a bit of a comfort blanket when I do need it. But again, I do have a bunch of biker shorts that I want to wear. So I guess I haven't really figured that out yet. And I would argue that I probably do need some gear that maybe speaks to me a little bit more, but getting wrestling gear is the hardest thing in the world. We don't want to talk about that. So yes, it does take a while to find the right style, and I think it's I think it's like when you wear normal clothes, right? There's no real right or wrong option as long as you own it. That always sounds dumb, but it's true. If somebody walks out there with all the confidence in the world, they could be wearing a tutu and you still be like, man, that person's amazing. Steve Morales says, what goes into creating spots for a match? I like how we've all decided to focus on wrestling. I like the fact you think I can answer too. And when time gets cut or lengthened, are there certain types of wrestlers you find easier to work with? So creating spots for a match, I don't think the term spots works when you're I guess it does and it doesn't, because really, well, I can only talk from my perspective. You're doing it from a story point of view. So who am I working? Does it tie into a bigger story? Is it just a match for the night? What's this person going on to do? What's our sizes, right? You always have to think about that. If one dude is way bigger than the other one, you don't be bumping them around till the end of the match, because you've just taken away what they can offer the show. And again, it should always be about what are we trying to offer the show. You will always, if you were backstage at a wrestling event, you're you'll always hear like bizarre phrases like, you give me one, I give you one, bish bash bosh. Like, what does that mean? But it does become code. But yeah, it all kind of ties into those things. So what's the last match that I had? Let's go for our progress one. So my stipulation with the Proteus title is, I throw 2 stipulations out to the audience and they choose. So we did, a move off the top rope to win. I was taking on Will Cruz, who not only is a mammoth guy, but he's really good at top rope stuff. That's sort of his MO, his USP, whatever you want to call it. I'm awful off the top rope. I don't look comfortable up there and my splashes suck. But I was like, okay, well, we'll tie that in. So if you do go watch the Progress show, which you can on Triller or Demand Progress streaming sites, you will see after I hit my first splash, I deliberately found a camera. I just went shrug emoji, and that was planned in because I knew the splash wasn't going to look very good because I'm just not very good at them, but I had to do it in the story of the match, and me doing that just told the audience, hopefully, and people did feedback in a positive way, which was nice. Oh, he's doing his best, for lack of a better term. And this is the same for anything. Matches do get cut. I've been in the position when you're about to walk out and someone says, oh, Simon, you had 12, you now got 8. You're like, okay, I've lost 4 minutes. Okay, cool. And there are not certain type of wrestlers who are better than that. There's just people that you like planning matches with and people that are a little bit more difficult. And that goes into all the sort of unexpected things that could happen. But I think that's the fun of wrestling, especially like, are you able to do it if your time does get cut? And of course, on the indie scene, usually you can go as long as you want. You'll just get a rough time. It's the shows that are done for streaming or TV, for example, AEW or WWE, where you can't miss your time cues because time cues are money. And also that's the professional part of being a wrestler. Can you do a match in 6 minutes? If the answer is no, well, you've got to get better at it. Alex Morris says, do you ever rewatch any of your videos, particularly your older ones, e.g. the early ups and downs, and how far do you think you've come? I do watch them just because people send them to me, which I do appreciate. I hope I've come a long way. I've seen some from 2016 where I want to smash my head into a wall, but that's good, right? It shows I have evolved. I think early on, it was very scripted and me just thinking of the words in my head, whereas now I have a script to remind me where I am and what I want to talk about, but a lot of it is ad-libbed and I feel very comfortable with myself and I always want to come across as honest and transparent. So I hope I'm better than that because I thought that was terrible. What are your goals in terms of your wrestling career to get on television one way or the other, be that WWE or AEW? Sometimes I skirt around these issues. I'm not doing that anymore. That's what I want to do. I want to achieve. Even if it's for one match, that's fine, but I want to get on television. Boom. There's the answer. Go tweet about it and social media about it. Do you have a number one goofy wrestling moment? Also, you should do a video for your top 10 goofy wrestling moments. I think we did one on What Culture. I don't know whether it went up, but I'm happy to do another one here too. My number one goofy wrestling moment, I would have to sit down and think about this. Santina Marella or R-Truth would probably be responsible for a lot of them, but there's small ones too, like when Kofi Kingston dropped his Jamaican accent. Triple H's like, what happened to your accent? I go watch that all the time. I don't even know why. It just tickles me. So there will be things like that. It's mostly when people break the fourth wall or they just understand how to do it. The New Day are masters at that. So yeah, there'll be loads. I'll sit down and think about that properly. It's a good question. David Coker says, what inspired you to become a wrestler yourself? And what's the best advice you can give somebody wanting to start out? Well, the latter part ties into what I said earlier. Just go and do it and have as much fun as possible. Even if it's not for you, you'll always be proud that you went and gave it a go. So yeah, and the inspiration is twofold. Always wanted to do it. I told you this is the third time of training. And I was lucky because we documented it for YouTube on What Culture. So I had accountability, like when you have a personal trainer. So there was no way I was going to quit that time. I could just feel it in my tum-tum. But also, given that I'd started doing the ups and downs and reviewing wrestling, I was like, who am I to review other people's wrestlers' matches without at least finishing a training camp? At least then I have what's the word I'm looking for? But a shoulder to cry on. That's not right. At least then I have some integrity, okay? I'm not saying you can't review wrestling without going, but that's how I saw it. Because then I was like, someone goes, you don't know what you're talking about. I was like, probably not, but I try to. And the camp was like, 3 months long, whatever it was. I was going to finish that training camp. As it turned out, I loved it and continued it on. But that definitely was sort of an option C about why I wanted to get it done. And today, I like to think I hold a little bit of a niche. Maybe I don't shout about it as enough as I should do, but that speaks to who I am as a person. There's probably somebody out there, but there are a few people out there that are reviewing wrestling on somewhat of a platform and also do the wrestling. And I'm wrestling every single weekend. Again, maybe I don't advertise it enough. Maybe it doesn't get in front of the right people. But I wrestled 2 matches last weekend. I got 2 matches this weekend. I think I have a weekend off the week after that because it's the What Culture Tour. If you're coming, I'll see you there. But yeah, every weekend I'm wrestling, and that's what I want to do. And the fact that I get to review wrestling, I think it's a really, really cool original position to have. So I guess deep down I was thinking about that as well. Zach Belina says, I'd love to know more about how you put a match together. How do you and your opponent decide what spots to call and when? How much detail do you give when you're calling spots? Do you always say okay to whatever your opponent says? No. In the early going I did, and I got in trouble very early for that. This is the issue with wrestling. You have to deal with egos and you're dealing with personalities. So I was wrestling one show, not going to name names, and the guy I was taking on was a lot smaller than me, but he wanted to bump me around in the front end. I was like, okay, I want to be a good soldier. I'm the rookie here. And afterwards, the promoter pulled me aside and said, I understand what's happened, but you don't know how to work. And I said, what do you mean? And he goes, obviously, I'm sure that you do, but I brought you in for your size on my show. You were one of the bigger guys. And then within 20 seconds, you're on your ass, you're on your back. So all the fans no longer built into the image that you put out there, into the aesthetic. And I was like, oh my gosh, he's right. And the only way to learn is by making mistakes. So that is really tough if somebody you believe is smaller than you or something doesn't make sense for the match to go, I don't think we should do that. But you always need to have a creative backup, right? As long as you can say, well, not this, but this. I think some people, or most people then realize, oh, you're not trying to mug me off. You're just trying to do what makes the most sense, because I always like to look at it from a fan point of view. So if I'm taking on Brad Wallpaper, to use the one that I always use, and Brad Wallpaper is 2 feet tall, I would want to see Brad Wallpaper get thrown around for a bit before Brad Wallpaper all of a sudden takes his Phoenix down and somehow bumps the big guy. David versus Goliath, right? It's the simplest story ever. Most of the time you are playing to people that are casual fans or family, fans with their kids that just want to see that kind of a stuff. I mean, the promoter should give you some direction. So I get the most direction from Progress, because obviously they plan long term. But it's nothing better and nothing cooler than when you have a creative guy and you can go back and forth. I mean, it is like doing artwork. I know that sounds silly when people say it. But when you do craft something, you go back through and you realize, oh, that makes sense and this makes sense. And that's going to lead to this. And then even though the fans don't realize it, in 6 months' time, they can look back on that. Yeah, it's the best. But even if it is just a match and there's no long-term planning, you kind of follow a structure. Like you'll notice most wrestling matches are good guy is in the lead. The heel does something dastardly, beats them up for a while. The good guy comes back and wins, and then you kind of shove your personality into there a little bit. And I've also done matches you don't plan at all, and sometimes they can be the most fun. And again, that's why wrestling's brilliant, because you just never know. Andreas says, how many years has it been since you've been following WWE? Oh man, I've been watching for like 23 years? Is that right? So yeah, about 23. Well, no, younger than that. I was like, why can't I do the maths? I started watching, I was like 5 years old, 25, 35. It's like 22 years. That's not right, 32 years. How old am I? I'm 37 years old. It's been a long time, right? Don't worry about it. And could you rank your top 5 favorites, not the best, your own favorites, men and women all time since you were watching? Man, I should have read that question before I chose it. So, Bret Hart, yes. Steve Austin, yes. The Macho Man Randy Savage, yes. This is why I had to start panicking and thinking of people. Kevin Owens, yes. And we'll go with one more, Kenny Omega. Yes, I've left so many people out. I hate myself. A lot of that is recency bias too. Women, Becky Lynch, yes. Oscar, yes. Rhea Ripley could be getting in there because I really, really do appreciate her work. Trish Stratus, yes, because she was the first person oh my gosh, WWE not treating women in the right way. And to do a last one, I would probably say somebody like Chyna, maybe? Like Chyna really did blow my brain when I first saw her back then. I don't really think she gets the respect that she deserves today because she opened a lot of doors. There'll be a lot of asterisks with those, but the fact they came to my head, I think, means something. Adam Bowe says, do you have any plans to come to the US and wrestle anytime soon? Yes, I'll be there WrestleMania weekend on the Thursday for Progress Wrestling. Come on down. And because I have to cover everything else for What Culture, that's my only showing. But I think last year I did like 18 performances in the US, so more will be coming soon. Keep an eye on social media. Black Hawk Bear says, what's your involvement been in the creative process for matches? Initial plans change, is adjustments on the fly, especially the title win and defenses. So the title win was all Progress. They gave me a call and said, can we talk to you? I thought they were going to tell me they weren't going to use me anymore. And they said, we'd like you to win this belt. It was one of the coolest phone calls I've ever had in my life. And then, yeah, most of the plans do come from them. And usually it's that case of, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And then you throw your 2 cents in there, right? Well, how about this? How about that? So you're not really in charge of the long-term ideas, but you can kind of change the little things, and they're very receptive, and it's very, very cool. Whereas other sort of decisions basically depend on your position in the company, I suppose. But Progress, I think, is the biggest company that I work for in terms of exposure. I think that's the right sentence. I think that makes sense. So yeah, I mean, when you're planning a match on an indie show, like a proper indie show, it's just you and somebody else, and they don't have any plans to do anything afterwards. You just sit down there, and again, you look at body types, you look at what they've done before and what they might do, and what kind of a heel they are. Are they a cowardly heel? Are they a tough heel? I mean, I'm usually like a John Cena babyface, so I kind of know my stuff. But yeah, it really does come down to that. And sometimes, obviously, you're working with someone that is vastly less experienced than you are, and then you become the ring general and you take charge of the match and you see if it works and it doesn't work. And that is half the fun, because you sometimes never know who you're going to work until you turn up at the building in terms of their personalities. Sometimes you click, sometimes you don't. It's basically like going to an office. Charlie says, what is your pick of the most underrated WWE theme song ever? You know what? Straight away, I got two. Owen Hart's Enough Is Enough theme, the original one, is brilliant, especially the breakdown in the middle. And D'Lo Brown's original theme before they changed it. I can't think of it now. I can only think of the new one. But it's like from 1998, and he changed it at the UK show Capital Carnage. Because I went to that show. I was basically like, 4 years old, whatever it was. I was so damn excited to hear it, and he came out to the new one, and I was devastated. Also, Goldust's original theme. Again, the middle section's wonderful. Raul says, hey Simon, long-time fan and supporter. I absolutely am able to keep up with wrestling only due to ups and downs. Now that will have me on the floor reeling. That's super duper cool. All the way over here from the UAE, my questions are, nowadays with social media, it's clear to everyone that wrestling and real life are two separate things. Regardless of their heel face status, people do have their own personas. Do you think that ruins the immersion in any way? Like if I see John Cena granting wishes right now, it kind of removes the experience of him being a bad guy. Do you think it's worse this way, or is wrestling just evolving with the day and age? I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think you don't have to be on social media, so you could, I mean, this would be tough, right? But you could remove that, or you could just not follow anybody. But I just think we've got to a stage now where we all know what wrestling is. We all know the wink, wink, nudge, nudge. So to then take that away from the wrestlers that can also be people, I think it's a good thing, but maybe that's just the way that I watch professional wrestling. I can totally disconnect. So if I saw John Cena doing a Make-A-Wish and then I tune on to Raw, I just say, well, that's John Cena the wrestler. I just forget all the rest. That's what I'm able to do, much like when I watch a movie. If I see Brad Pitt in a really good performance, then I see him walking around, I don't go, oh man, it's ruined the movie for me. But I totally understand that other people aren't the same. For example, Mark Calloway, The Undertaker, made a whole career of doing that. But I think there is so much benefit and there's so much fun to getting to learn about the real people, as well as then seeing what they're going to do in the ring. That's one of the reasons I've been a fan for so long, because I was always a massive fan. But then you learn about the backstage stuff and you're hooked for life. So the fact that we can get these two different characters that are existing in the same space, personally, I think that's better. But of course, I understand the other side. If you want to totally buy in to the point you see, I don't know, Ricochet, he's a heel right now, being a right twonk on the internet, that's only going to make you hate him more. And then maybe you buy a ticket and you go to the show. So again, there's pros and cons. It's each to their own. I personally think it's great. Godin says, who do you think will be the next face of the company after the Cody and Roman era? Well, we never know, because nobody would have said Cody back in 2016. I think... could it be Jey Uso? Maybe. He is crazy over to a level you don't really get to. I think we'd have to see, does he do more interviews and stuff when he becomes world champion? Bron Breakker, absolutely, if he continues to grow into that role. And Jacob Fatu, absolutely. I mean, he especially could take on for Roman Reigns because there's so many similarities there. Otherwise, I think it's probably going to be on the other side. I think Rhea Ripley absolutely could be in that role. Roxanne Perez, because she's so young and she's evolved so fast. So maybe Rhea Ripley could lead it, much like Becky Lynch did in 2018 when she blew up. You may get somebody like on the women's side, but then has more longevity with it, mostly because Becky Lynch was booked terribly. Not her fault, different conversation for a different day. But right now, of people that are sort of on the cusp, I always say that Rhea Ripley has the potential to be a John Cena type star, so it could be her. And I just think she's so unashamedly herself. She is going to be so inspirational to people, hence why she is so big on stuff like TikTok, because she feels real. Sometimes that's the most important part. Nash says, hey Simon, saw you at Discovery Wrestling last weekend when you were healing it up. I did. That's Joe Hendry's promotion as well, so thank you to Joe. Is it hard to transition from face to heel depending on what promotion you're doing? Also, do you have a preference, heel or face? All the love. So I love being a heel because no one books me as a heel. UPW books me a heel, now Discovery Wrestling does up in Scotland, so thank you very much for that. And I just think to be a good professional wrestler, you have to be able to know how to do all of them. But right now, it is my preferred way to be a face, only because I like to think over the last 6 months, especially when I won my Progress title, it just gave me a confidence boost. I started to understand the best way to at least try and connect with the audience as a babyface. And because I've been getting good reactions and good connection, I've started to like it a lot. And I've tried things and things have failed. So now I'm starting to learn what works and what doesn't work. And I'm doing the whole less is more routine. I'm working on my selling, which I really enjoy doing too. So it is absolutely, you have to sort of change your mindset, because I like everything to be as believable within the moment as possible. But right now I am enjoying being a face. It's super fun. I just think I've come up with my own system after borrowing and taking and stealing and coming up with my own stuff. So now you're excited about performing it every single week. And it doesn't always go well. I'm just enjoying. And that was it. That was the last question. I didn't realize I probably should have checked that to get my tone of voice right. But genuinely, thank you for all the questions. We'll try and do these once a month, and I'll put them as many places as I can. You can ask whatever questions you want. Did not expect that many about me, so that's very humbling. I thought it was going to be a lot of fantasy booking stuff. But I guess that's the rest of the videos. But genuinely, bless your heart. And you can drop more questions down here too in the comments. I can absolutely check them out. But like the video, share the video, subscribe, click the video on the screen, which is me talking about how potentially amazing that WrestleMania 41 card could be. I don't really understand the negativity, but I like to have the conversation. Otherwise, if you're into your fitness supplements, it is grillermind.com/Simon. There's a link down there. I'm really going to push this on you this week because till Sunday it's 25% off, so you should take advantage of that. Otherwise, Simon316 on all social media, Simon J. Miller on TikTok, Simon on Cameo, Pro Wrestling Tees, and simon.bigcartel.com. All my new t-shirts, my Baldy t-shirts, my Surprise Roll-Up t-shirts, they're all there. Thank you to everyone that did buy a Baldy t-shirt. That was cool. And those my friends. You take care, and I'll see you soon.